the national polling seems to have shifted a bit, and perhaps over a threshold of even the plus what I think 5% now. So that would be beyond the margin of error for Kamala Harris. But the swing state polling that just came out from the New York Times Siena people really shows Trump ahead by as much in those critical swing states. What do you take from this? What's important?
So if you listen to Nate Cohen of the New York Times, his analysis of even their own polling came out yesterday. He said their poll, and then his analysis this morning is basically, hey, we don't know what's going on. Seriously. I mean, and I don't mean that to put Nate down or the New York Times, but basically he said, you know what? This is kind of crazy because to your point, Mark, and you summed it up well, their polling of these so-called, they call them now the sunshine states, North Carolina, Arizona, Georgia, showing Trump now with a significant lead. I mean, 4 to 5 points in each of those states. And what's confounding to Nate is, okay, so maybe we got one state wrong, right? I mean, maybe one is 5 points, but the others are showing, it's just a point. But all of them, all three of those states are showing leads for Trump. Whereas to your point, the national poll, which it's important for people to remember, we do not elect presidents nationally. We elect them by 50 separate state elections. That's how the Electoral College is currently continued to be set up. That, the national poll is not as important, but those are the facts. Now, more generally, Mark, if you and look, one other important thing about the New York Times poll, I think, is why people should pay more attention to it, is it's the only current, as they call it, quality poll, okay? I'm saying that with air quotes. One of the big polls that has been conducted completely subsequent to Trump's second assassination attempt a weekend before last, right? That's why people are giving it a lot of weight, because some of the other ones were in the process of being out in the field during that. So the poll's been giving a lot of credence. We'll see where it goes. I think really importantly, Mark, what's going to be the tail of the tape is a couple of more of these in the next week, and especially where those blue states end up. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania over the next week. We should know a lot more.
So let me just fill in then this one detail. What you're essentially suggesting is that were these Sun Belt or Sunshine States, you call them, the states that we mentioned, if they were to indeed reflect in the vote what we're seeing now in polling, then, and this is kind of why you're talking about the blue states or the blue wall or whatever, those critical blue states, if Trump were to win one of those, you're saying, then it would be all over.
That's pretty accurate, yeah. Especially if it was Pennsylvania, then it would definitely be all over. All right, so, and these are the 7 states, throw Nevada in there. We haven't mentioned Nevada yet. These are the ones that people are watching most carefully. And, there's no getting around that. They are the ones that have been within the margin of error. So to put it in a broader context, if you still continue to aggregate the polls, Mark, if you sort of take the last week to 10 days of all of the polls combined, last 2 weeks, you still have every one of these battleground states in total, in aggregation, within the margin of error.
The things that make an impact on this sort of thing fascinate me because we are so dug in. And then you'll hear these, quote, undecideds, and you see them meander and why they consider themselves undecided. And sometimes, honestly, and those are, having been in media for a long time, both of us, we know you grab these people, it can be MOS type stuff, man on the street stuff, or it can be anything. You grab 3 people and you get them, they say, and then the other 30 people say something else, but you only run the 3 people that you want. But more assuming that it's somewhat representative, they end up in this place where it comes down to personality a lot of the time. I was hearing, I don't trust her when it comes to Kamala Harris. I was reading this also in the drill down on the New York Times stuff, that the I don't trust her. I hope she's not lying. And I'm thinking, you're up against a guy who's demonstrably probably the biggest liar in the history of the presidency. I mean, completely invented stuff. These are documented things. This isn't just my opinion. And so the notion, though, that it comes down to sort of personality and a je ne sais quoi is a constant reminder of how much like a high school election this is.
Well, there's no getting around the fact that in modern American politics, you have policy and you have personality, right? I mean, those are the two big deciding factors. People put those on their own scale and they weigh one, they weigh the other. But especially with modern media, Mark, as you're talking about, with TV, with radio, I mean, the advent of those things were huge in politics. Now put social media in there, right? I mean, now you have a political milieu that is unlike any that we've experienced. I mean, in 2 years, this nation's going to celebrate its 250th anniversary. And it's only been in the last couple of decades that we've had this kind of a visual electronic medium. And only in the last decade, we've had people basically making their own videos and posting them, right? Giving their own content out there available for whoever wants it. So we are in uncharted waters to a large degree. And Mark, that is what makes the polling task so much more difficult, because things can swing. Some of these polls are conducted as online polls, not the big ones, but some of them are. And that's what makes it challenging. And also because, of course, people get information so much more quickly and reactions to information much more quickly than we ever had even just 10, 15 years ago.
I want to ask you about a tactic that we touched on before you got here, and it's really cranked up to 10. And it's the attempt to purge state voter rolls ahead of the election. This is a tried and true part of American politics, sadly. But there is now a questioning of the accuracy of voter rolls on a level that we really haven't seen. You can let us know, but it seems as though we haven't seen it, in our lifetimes. I'm asking about the effect of that. I mean, I know it's being done in different ways and in different states. Maybe you can just give us a sense of how you feel it'll impact the election.
Well, Mark, if you go back, it depends how long one's lifetime is. But if you go back to Kennedy, Nixon, 1960, the most famous example of this is the so-called stuffing of the Chicago ballot boxes by Chicago Mayor Richard Daley, which put Illinois, I mean, that sort of put all this stuff on the map, that one could actually manipulate the vote somehow, right? And then it's grown, and at various times it's wafted back and forth. And then, of course, Trump made this famous when he was talking about you can't trust mail-in balloting. Now, of course, the GOP, interestingly, is pushing folks to get out and vote, because it's important for people to know people are voting right now. I mean, as we speak, this is not just an election day phenomenon. In fact, I heard one pollster estimate in the last week that by election day itself, Mark, 80% of the vote will have already been cast by November 5th. So, this early voting stations, the mail-in balloting. I mean, some states conducting their elections completely by mail-in balloting now. So this is going to be something that not only is talked about, but as I've reminded people, wait till we start voting on our phones, which is just another generation at most away. When people are voting electronically, you're going to get your ballot by some people are already conducting experiments with this, and you'll vote by your phone. The next generation, they're clamoring for this. They don't want a paper ballot, right? I mean, the next gen folks are like, what are you talking about? Going to a polling place with my grandmother sitting there, and she's going to hand me a ballot, and I'm going inside this little booth thing. That's weird, So that's going to happen, but the contentions that you're talking about, Mark, are not going to go away. They're not going to go away with this election cycle. And the challenge is going to become not only practically maintaining the integrity of the process, legally maintaining the integrity of the process, but then I think what you're getting to, Mark, importantly, is perceptually maintaining the integrity of the election process. And that, of course, in any working democracy is absolutely vital.
Well, I mean, I love that you make that last point, because in the 2020 election, Trump lost and continues to pursue to this moment the idea that it was stolen from him. It's a tactic. He complained about the fact they're going to steal it. He was setting himself. He did it in 2016. He didn't think it was going to win, but he said they're setting it up. It's fixed. And when he won, he created that whole, remember the investigation over the 2 to 3 million illegals who voted in New England? I think it was New Hampshire or whatever. I mean, that was real money and real time, government money, our money, and real time government spent investigating something that we knew wasn't right. He said that buses of illegals came in and voted for Hillary Clinton. It was absurd. And so he is arguing that now. So when you say it's the perception that it's fair, I mean, it seems one side is committed to the notion of pursuing this ridiculousness, which is associated with undermining the faith in the election.
Well, I will tell you this from a pragmatic point of view, Mark. There are scores of lawyers already on both sides working on this. There are poll observers. Make no mistake about it. I mean, both parties are investing a tremendous amount of resources in this whole, in their own view, attempt to make sure that their side is properly counted and represented. So, we've had some of this in the past, but nothing on the scale and scope we're going to see this time of people, from start to finish, watching ballots, monitoring polling places, having attorneys at the ready to file things. I mean, this is going to be, what made this most famous, of course, was the famous hanging chads in Florida, and then watching people, hold them up to the sky. And was the Chad hanging or was it gone? You remember all those days?
Sure, of course. I mean, and SCOTUS intervened. I mean, that was a. I think that election was hijacked. Again, you can say I'm a partisan, but come on, guys. I mean, you didn't. I mean, there have been independent vote counts since. I want to ask you about. There it is, the hanging Chad. Thank you, Tony. I want to ask your impression of something, Gary Dietrich. We've never done this before with you, but I'm really curious. I mean, you are such a seasoned vet at this stuff. Tony, will you play Gary Dietrich one of these spots that's running? Play me the Kamala Harris is running a series of ads in swing states, Gary Dietrich, and I'm curious as to how effective you think these ads are. I particularly like a couple of them, but these are, again, they're short ads, so it won't take long. And here, Tony will play one for you. Go ahead, Tony. Thank you.
Donald Trump's back, and he's out for control.
I would have every right to go after them.
Complete control.
I will wield that power very aggressively.
And he has a plan to get it.
Detailed plans for exactly what our movement will do.
It's called Project 2025, a 922-page blueprint to make Donald Trump the most powerful president ever. Overhauling the Department of Justice, giving Trump the unchecked power to seek vengeance, eliminating the Department of Education, and defunding K-12 schools, requiring the government to monitor women's pregnancies, and severe cuts to Medicare and Social Security. Donald Trump may try to deny it, but those are Donald Trump's plans.
Well, revenge does take time, I will say that. And sometimes revenge can be justified.
He'll take control, we'll pay the price.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Now, Gary Dietrich, tell me how effective that ad is.
Mark, that is an outstanding question, and it's one that I've started asking myself because here's the interesting thing. This 2025 attack line, as you know, you didn't really hear about it before the Democratic convention. I mean, when Biden was the nominee, it wasn't really out there. But since that time, the Democrats have made no bones about it. When you ask them, what are your chief attack lines for the rest of the campaign the next 2 months? They always say abortion first. That's always job one. Project 2025 has now come up. And then just this entire idea of a threat to democracy, et cetera. And what's interesting to me is, to my knowledge, Mark, there has not been really good polling yet on the public's perception of Project 2025, right? I mean, both parties have sort of staked out and dug in their heels. Republicans saying, well, we don't, that's not Trump's vision. He didn't authorize that. And Democrats absolutely making this one of their pillars. But here's what I'm wondering, Mark, and I'm going to start pushing some of our folks nationally at the networks to try to help us dig down on this a little bit. Does the public think this is a big deal, right? Do they understand what Project 2025 is or isn't, or do they even care? I have to say this. When you tell people a 900-page blueprint, That right there is a recipe for eyes being glazed over, right? So you have to be careful how one uses. Now, they've tried to pull out nuggets and what Democrats think are talking points. But I think you've raised an important question, Mark, because if you're going to spend political capital, and you're going to spend it in swing states, you want to make sure it's landing, right? You want to make sure it's resonating. And I honestly haven't yet, and I'm just being as objective about this as I can. I haven't heard any buzz sort of gurgling up, you know what I mean?
Sure.
From the hinterlands, from the coffee shops, people going, geez, that's crazy. Like they do about gas prices, like they do about immigration. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Like they do about abortion. I mean, you'll hear a lot of people say, "Yeah, I'm voting on abortion." And by the way, most recent polling out shows this: 15% of voters, abortion their top issue. 15% of voters, these are rough numbers, but pretty accurate. Immigration is their top issue. No surprise, 39-40% still inflation and the economy. So what I'm saying, Mark, is I haven't yet seen good evidence that Project 2025 has gotten a solid foothold. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've seen that actually, and maybe this is an outlier. I've seen that there is voter awareness of 2025 on a grand scale. Like 75% of voters or those polled, I remember seeing it, were aware of Project 2025. Now, that doesn't mean that they know everything about 2025. It means that they're aware of 2025. So, but nobody's read Project 2025, really, as Eamon says. No voter has read Project 2025. Now, let me just quickly give you 20 seconds on why I thought that ad was effective. That was Trump's words are used in there, right? Trump is essentially saying everything, and they did excerpt things from Project 2025 that are stated. The reshaping of government, the reshaping of the Justice Department, CDC, everything. I mean, they really went through it all. These things are noted. Now, again, reasonable minds can differ as to, how effective it might be, but that's why I liked it. I want to play you another ad. Go ahead, Tony. What was the other ad I sent you? I wanted Gary's impression on this, because you're right, Gary Dietrich. It's a question of how they punch through. I only have you for another minute or so, I'm really curious as to your impression. Go ahead, Tony.
American greatness isn't something you can buy, something you can demand, or that one man can give you. American greatness is earned. It doesn't look a certain way, or worship in a certain church. Greatness is in all of us, in every American heart. It's always been here, through the work and pain and struggle, to earn the gift so many died for.
Kamala Harris believes that every person should have an opportunity to enter the middle class. She believes in something so beautiful and simple with joy. She believes in the promise of this great nation.
American greatness is the gift we all share. Greatness is in all of us. You don't need someone to make you great. You're an American. Greatness was in you all along.
So that's a Lincoln Project spot that is running in swing states. How about that?
Well, I think, Mark, real quick on the last one, by the way, I think the question is awareness. You really hit the nail on the head. Awareness of a project is one thing. Impact on somebody's vote is the real key. And that's the question I raised about the 2025 project. We don't yet have evidence. Oh, I'm voting. People telling posters, I'm voting because of that. This ad is really interesting because to me, it comes across as very emotive, obviously, and I say the modern Democratic Party version of Ronald Reagan's 1980 Morning in America.
Totally agree.
Right?
Totally agree.
It is that welling up of the American spirit that Reagan tapped into in 1980 when people were done with the malaise, they were done with the gas crisis, they were done with the Iranian hostage crisis, they were done with Vietnam. By God, we need morning in America, right? And that's what I think this, sort of, to me, resonates with. And is part of, as you know, the Harris-Walz notion of, they call it joy, they call it whatever. But it's the same thing of trying to tap into what they believe to be the real heart and soul of America. I think both are well crafted, by the way, in terms of advertising. The question is going to be, again, do they move the needle?
Right. Quickly on your way out, handle this question from a listener viewer. Underdog says, hey, Gary, do you believe Trump is planning another Green Bay sweep, making the election so convoluted in the swing states that it goes to the Supreme Court, then to Congress, and back to the states?
Well, he won't have control over that. I mean, the reason why something goes to the Supreme Court, if there's legal questions, or like in Florida, they literally had to determine the validity of those ballots. So I think there's so many unknowns, Mark. I don't think we can be predicting at this point what's going to get to a very, I'm sure there's going to be court challenges. I have no doubt about it. How efficacious those are, yet to be determined.
Efficacious is too good a word to leave. It's a ding word. So strong. Gary, we love you. And I know that you come to us today with a sponsor. I'm very excited to, and I want to read Gary's sponsorship so I don't mess it up, because this is a sponsor that's made Gary's appearance possible here on this show. So our thanks to Bill Campbell at Remax Gold for sponsoring Gary Dietrich on the Mark Thompson Show. If you're relocating into or from Northern California, you need a highly respected real estate professional, contact Bill Campbell of Remax Gold. Call or text him at 530-448-7474, 530-448-7474. You're so great. We're so honored and delighted to have you be part of things. You're the best with politics stuff. We love you. Can't wait till next week. What a week it was, and what an exciting week is ahead. Thanks. Gary Dietrich, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.